Have y'all seen the Barbie movie yet? Yeah, okay, a lot of yeses, some no's. I'm very excited to see it, mainly because of what it's doing to white women. This is crazy. This is wild. What is happening? Like, I haven't seen it yet. I don't know what's happening in the movie, but white women are walking out militant as hell. This shit is Malcolm X for white women. This is crazy. Dude, all of my white female friends that walk out of the movie are like, maybe we should do something about the Supreme Court. I'm like, jeez. What is happening in the movie? It is wild. This shit is like 300 for blondes that were in sororities. This is crazy. They just walk out of the movie like, I wish a man would try to give me directions right now. I wish. Ooh, I wish.
Welcome to WYCD Wicked, that stands for What You Can Do. How are y'all doing tonight? That was Josh Johnson, a comedian on YouTube who has finally talked about something vaguely political, which has given me the excuse necessary to open the show with him. Boy, I find him very funny and hope that he gets the one of those specials that they're handing out like candy on Netflix. He is a funny man. Anyway, how y'all doing? Rustbox, hello. Wireless Mike, Christy Z, hello there. Wicked Foxy Dragon, good to see you. Scott Ward, we got the gang here. I love it. Let's jump in to the news. Let's see what's going on in the world. We got a cat by the name of Steve Ratner who put on a fantastic presentation that really shows, I think, something we've been talking about for a while, in terms that are perhaps, well, let me put it like this. They are, it's good to see numbers. This was more or less logicked out between the chat of the community and your old pal here, but I think the way it's laid out here makes a lot more sense. I'm going to do that intro now, though, so I can stop saying things vaguely. Here we go. It was Morning Joe on MSNBC, where I saw the most well put together argument for the exhaustion strategy for 2024. The Republicans are going to be running out of money at the way things are going right now. They are not a good investment for oligarchs, because oligarchs do require that the country exist and be stable in order to do what they do. And Trump is sucking up all the small dollar donors, which leaves no dollar donors of any size left for the rest of them. That's to the benefit of sane human beings everywhere. Here's Steve Ratner on Morning Joe breaking down exactly what's happening to all the money.
3 past the hour. As former President Donald Trump's legal troubles grow, so do his legal bills. And it comes with consequences for his political campaign. Let's bring in former Treasury official and Morning Joe economic analyst Steve Ratner, who is at the wall with charts. And I take it, Steve, Donald Trump doesn't like to pay personally his own bills.
He doesn't like to pay personally his own bills, but
God damn, I'm sorry. We got to take a minute. Look at that setup. That's a nice studio. That's a real nice studio. Ooh. All right, lads, let's see what you got.
He's been raising some money, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But let's start by talking about the impact of Donald Trump's indictments on his fundraising, because it's kind of interesting. So if you look over here, these are Google searches, and you can see that after the Manhattan indictment, his searches on Google shot way, way up here to it's an index number of 100, pretty much as high as it can go. Then you can see a little bit of a bump during the Jean Carroll thing. Then the documents indictment, much less of a bump in his Google searches. And then January 6th, also much less of a bump. But interestingly, his fundraising has tracked this to a considerable degree. He raised almost $4 million in one day after the Manhattan indictments, and a total of $14 million over this period. But it did trail off. He only raised $6 million after the documents indictment. And we don't know yet about the other two, but at least the initial rush of donors to him over that faded. But when you look at the...
One moment. I have a question. Will the fact that Fani Willis is a black woman, and she is seen as the sort of the head of this indictment, let's say, the leader of it, will that get a bunch of donations from terrified white folks? It genuinely might. Be warned. Be ready for that. But the question I have about the rest of that is, are these folks that were donating out of money, or rather, are they running out of money, or are they running out of interest? I don't have an answer. But we predicted here on the channel, I use the term we because I don't think I'm fairly confident I wasn't the only one that said it amongst us all here. But we predicted that people have a certain amount of money they're willing to give to a cause, and they have a certain amount of money that they have to give to anything at all, and they will run out of it. That this lines up with that theory of how this operates. But it's also worth noting people have a certain amount of patience. Like, I gave you $100, politician, and you said it was to X, but you didn't do X, and now you're asking for another $100. No, you can coast off the $100 I gave you, or convince somebody else to give you $100. That is in my head. That's how the feelings end up translating to thoughts when I'm thinking about politicians. And I'm assuming, I could be wrong, but I'm assuming that's what's going on in the heads of Trump supporters.
The impact on his total fundraising. He's raised $54 million during this period, the first half of this year. $20 million of it came in the wake of those two sets of indictments. So the indictments have been a big part on the revenue side, if you will, of his finances, of his campaign.
And certainly, Steve, a flurry of emails soliciting donations have come out this week from the campaign after the Georgia indictment. But that's the money he's raised, but he's also had to spend quite a bit. And your second chart there on the Southwest wall is about the legal fees and how they're draining the campaign's coffers.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. He has actually been paying not only his legal fees, but for a bunch of his team out of his campaign finances. And it would probably be interesting for a donor to Trump to know that 50 cents of every dollar he raised in the first half of this year went to pay legal fees. So if you give money to Donald Trump, half of it, roughly, at least for the last 6 months, has been his legal defense fund, and the other half actually his campaign, so you should know what you're giving to. But you can see that over time, his legal bills have been mounting quarter by quarter, 6 to 8 to 12 to 15 million. His fundraising did drop a bit. It was higher in the second quarter of this year. We'll see how that all falls out. But then it's had a pretty big impact on his cash on hand. He went from $114 million of cash at the beginning of last year, most of this in one of his PACs, all the way down to $63 million at the moment. But this PAC of his main PAC, has literally gone down to $5 million of cash. So his cash coffers have come down a good bit as he's paid his legal bills and also, of course, some money for his campaign.
So these donors must really be.
We'll get to the second half of that in a moment. So with that chart that's up there, you actually see the sources of power and influence in Trump's life shifting pretty dramatically. But also understand that these cases have just begun. And in Georgia, there are 19 defendants. Trump's primary legal strategy, by way, I'm not even suggesting that the strategy is itself legal. It's just his primary strategy for dealing with the charges in a courtroom, let's say. Yeah, there we go. His primary courtroom strategy has been to use House attorneys, to use for all the people that would have testified against him or could have testified against him, let's say. He buys their attorney. And that's how he gets away with so much. Not exactly a complicated magic trick. He pays for the attorney of folks that would testify against him, combining that with the threat of violence from his supporters and how unpleasant he'll make the testifier's life. That's where you get the behavior we've seen from a lot of people. But he's got, I mean, look at how fast he burned through $50+ million. You can hire a reasonable attorney for less than $1 million. I don't know why. I understand rich people play a different game, but I'm familiar with the middle class game that's played and taking people to court and what have you. And I'll tell you, I've never seen the case that was worth what Trump has paid for attorneys. So we talked about people flipping, and we talked about the weight of the cases against him, the weight of the evidence in the cases against him, and reasons people might be flipping just because they don't want to go to prison. But also understand this guy's running out of money, and right now he's picking who of those 18 other defendants he can afford to pay for. It's a bad time to be Trump, which means it's a good time to be everybody else. Let's let the gang bring it home. They did good so far.
Supportive of Donald Trump being so willing to pay his legal bills. Claire McCaskill, you have the next question.
Yeah, Steve, did you have a chance to...
Nope. I don't give a damn what Claire McCaskill has to say. So I'm going to be super immature and wrap it up there. Let's see what the Wicked community has to say. Tinkerbell, no one would take this case working on the cheap be for real. Yeah. I mean, that's true. I got no notes. You're right. Anti-corporatist, hello. Good to see you. Oh, mercy me. Oh, Scott Ward with the very kind $5. Thank you. We no longer need representatives. Technology will provide for a true democracy. I think a combination of that is actually, I think that's probably true in combination. I don't think that's a crazy thought. I just think we will probably always require somebody whose job it is to read the boring in these bills and understand them and make decisions on our behalf. Just because we don't have the time. But I mean, you bring up the core of what you're saying, I think, is absolutely true. With technology, democracy becomes easier, and we have failed to fully take advantage of that. The closest we can come, I think, right now is through email campaigns and doing stuff like this, but with town halls. That's what I'm trying to think of. Town halls, but just online. I think some integration of technology is very much in our near future. Ooh. Tinkerbell, like the stream if you haven't already. My hero. Thank you. Oh. Domenico, good to see you. Elaine Sharp. Y'all have me laughing, but I will get to the what you can do, because now I need to. Yesterday's stream, bless y'all for for staying with me, but oh boy, that was technically quite rough. Not too proud to admit it. And I should probably make use of the pixel progressives that I haven't put out to fill up these spots in between, or learn to chew gum and walk at the same time. That might also help. All right, so the title of this live stream was darn near "If you see something, say something," and the reason why is our first what you can do of the night. Let's get into it. It will not surprise you to hear that Donald Trump, a well-known stochastic terrorist, is engaged in stochastic terrorism, along with all of his scumbag buddies. Let's have a look through once again MSNBC. I got good programming these days.
Hi again, everyone. It's 5 o'clock in the East. Tragically, it is becoming a more common and terrifying phenomenon, people turning to violence in furtherance of their extreme political beliefs. In recent years, the number of violent threats against politicians and government officials has ticked up. And in some instances, as you saw there, those threats have materialized into actual attacks, or at least attempted ones. The specter of political violence is not new. But what is relatively new is the public permission structure around it. For the past several years, the leader of the Republican Party, the Republican frontrunner, who also happens to be an ex-president, has signaled in both implicit and explicit ways that his perceived enemies should be punished, held to account through aggressive or violent means. He has riled up his base with incendiary rhetoric and images. And as we've witnessed, those messages can be interpreted by individuals in ways that can result in disastrous consequences. All of this top of mind as the indictment issued Monday night out of Fulton County, Georgia for Donald Trump includes a...
All right, I appreciate what she's saying. The message is correct. I think she has and forgive me if this is the wrong word, but I'm going to take a whack at the $5 dictionary. A lexicon. And if it's the wrong word, I apologize. Here's what I meant to say. A collection of words she uses to make her sentences that was built in the bad old days of news, when the most important thing was not to make anybody even slightly terse with you. Actually, let me rephrase that. Was to make sure that no conservative was ever even slightly annoyed with you. That was the most important thing. And so she's saying it's a phenomenon. Oh, it's a phenomenon. What's happening? And then turning around and pointing to why it's happening. And I'm not, again, this is not really a harsh critique. I'm not saying call up this gal and tell her to talk different. It's just, it annoys me to see the remnants of that rear its head sometimes. And it generally takes the form of not being confident when they're saying Trump's a criminal and he's acting like a mob boss, even though Trump's a criminal and he is acting like a mob boss. And I'm not saying he's a criminal because of these accusations. I'm saying he's a criminal because in New York he was found to have sexually assaulted a woman. Oh, and his organization was found to have engaged in fraud.
List of names of the 23 grand jurors who eventually returned a 41-count indictment against the ex-president and 18 co-defendants. Their names are on the indictment due to Georgia state law, but now NBC News is reporting that their purported names and addresses have been posted on a fringe website that often features violent rhetoric. Washington Post is reporting on this and says that a post on a pro-Trump extremist forum said, quote, "It is time we do the doxing," invoking a practice that typically refers to exposing someone to harassment by publishing their personal information online. Another agreed, writing this, quote, "People need to be outside these people's houses." And it is not just the jurors on the receiving end of these intimidation tactics. The now 4 times indicted ex-president has been using his social media platform to spew ugly criticisms and attacks against prosecutors and judges overseeing his criminal cases. Last week, Judge Tanya Chutkan, the judge overseeing Jack Smith's election subversion case, warned Trump against making inflammatory statements. It is a warning he did not heed. He's also vicious.
Now, I realize they have yet another appointment to meet and talk about whatever already on the books. But as much as it breaks my heart to say it, we already have a strike against Tanya Chutkan. She gave crystal clear orders. He defied those orders. There has yet to be a consequence. Now, granted, what she said was that his behavior will affect the timeline. And she has not, as I said, she has not had an opportunity yet to say, we're amending the timeline because you've demonstrated blah, 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 blah. But what was the point of her giving those strict orders? To stop him from doing stochastic terrorism. What has he done? Exactly what he was told not to. So, we need consequences. It's silly, frankly, that this guy is just allowed to be out in the community with law-abiding citizens right now. It's dangerous. It's an insult to the rest of us who actually have to obey court orders if they are given to us, who actually have to obey the law. It's an insult to us. Every suck of air he pulls in through his tiny, ruined nostrils is an insult to us because that's air free people are supposed to be breathing. And he shouldn't be one of us. Not now, not the way he's behaving. Let's see. Let's see if there is decency coming along the way. Regardless, we don't have to wait for others. I'll tell you what you can do after this segment.
Viciously attacked Special Counsel Jack Smith, Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis, and Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. The New York Times reports that, quote, some lawyers have said that if Trump were an ordinary citizen issuing these attacks, he would be in jail by now. Trump's potentially dangerous rhetoric and the threat of political violence in America is where we begin this hour with some of our favorite experts and friends. Former Assistant Director for Counterintelligence at the FBI, Frank Figliuzzi, is back with us. Also joining us, former Department of Homeland Security Chief of Staff, author of the book Blowback, A Warning to Save Democracy from the Next Trump, and the host of the Whistleblowers podcast. Miles Taylor is here, and Democratic strategist and director of the public policy program at Hunter College, Basil Smykel, is here. Miles, you have so much going on, but I know you are animated and motivated by this desire to warn of the natural end game for Trump and his supporters, and that has been something you've been warning about the loudest, maybe the longest, you and Frank Figliuzzi. Talk about what you see in this moment.
I have an obvious bias, but it does tickle me every time I see somebody from new media show up on old media. It's a sign of the times changing. We don't need to go into all of the structure of whatever, but it does mean that the stuff that's been talked about mostly on podcasts and mostly on Twitch streams and YouTube shows and what have you, that stuff is making its way onto the airwaves, like to audiences that would never have seen it otherwise. And in my opinion, it is changing the conversation for the better. It is revealing the soul of both our parties in the U.S., and it's also forcing lefties to have serious conversations for like maybe the first time in my lifetime, and it's just amazing to see.
Well, this book Blowback, Nicole, I didn't want to write it because, as I've said to you many times, I don't want to be talking about politics anymore, but we're stuck in this environment where political violence is one of the biggest threats to our country. And the reason I talk extensively about it is because we now have a political party that is mainstreaming that violence as an acceptable tactic. And the studies show that the GOP base is embracing it. But one of the worries is that this was foreseeable. It was very foreseeable. In fact, there's someone I want to quote. Go back to 2016, one of Donald Trump's Republican opponents for the GOP nomination very prophetically spelled this out. He warned that Trump had a history of inciting violence, that his henchmen did, that if he took the White House, he would be like Michael Corleone from The Godfather, and that this would be a very dangerous environment because he would run that administration like a mafia and he would act like a mobster. That person who made that warning was Ted Cruz, the same U.S. senator who this week defended Donald Trump against the charges in Georgia. So that just goes to show you how powerful this radicalization has been, that the same people who were warning that this guy would incite mass violence have now been brainwashed to go out there and defend him for some of those past acts that led to violence. I think it's a big worry. Donald Trump continues to blow that dog whistle. He did it to me when I came out against him. And it's why, Nicole, many times I've joined your show from different places. One of the apartments I used to join your show, we had to leave that apartment because of the menacing packages and messages that were arriving there with regularity. We did not feel like it was safe to stay there anymore. And I don't need people's sympathy, but it's just one example of many, many examples of this happening around the country. And unfortunately, now we are seeing that with the jurors in this case, which is wrong, and law enforcement should pay.
Okay, real quick, let's just remind everyone of what the definition, literally, the definition of terrorism is. Define terrorism: the unlawful use of violence and I'm going to add a /or, intimidation, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political aims. And the example they give is quite right, to the fight against terrorism. As in, this is something we should we should not permit. Oh God! All right, let's go back to this author. I'm more happy that he's a podcaster, and but nonetheless, he's spitting some truth there. And I just want to be clear that what Trump is engaged in is terrorism.
Pay close attention to whether there's further violations of the law because of that intimidation.
You know, Frank, we have a lot of conversations about the sort of structural inadequacy available to law enforcement of staying left of boom of domestic terrorism. And I wonder if you think we're reaching a tipping point where a policy conversation can ensue, or is it too much on one side for that to happen?
Boy, I'm way beyond hoping and wishing that we're going to get to policy or even legislation here. Still don't have a domestic terrorism law, as you know, and more importantly, the tools in the toolkit I think are still not there for law enforcement. So when I look across the extremist sites just today before coming on the show, I see, as you said, vile racist attacks on Fani Willis and others. I see people adopting the use of Donald Trump's now word. This is a new thing. He's using a word that rhymes with the N-word, and now it's been adopted by these extremists to refer to black people. So, you know, that's coming soon to a theater near you. That's horrible. But someone's going to get hurt. They're going to get hurt, and I can predict that, not because I'm clairvoyant, but because it's already happened. People have been killed because of the ideology and rhetoric and inciting of Donald Trump. Most recently, the police officers, the Capitol Hill police officers and Metro PD police officers on January 6 who had heart attacks and or strokes and or died by suicide. The people in the Walmart in El Paso, Texas, who were killed by a young man who adapted the rhetoric, the brown invader language of Donald Trump. The people in the Tops supermarket in Buffalo, because the shooter there adopted the white replacement theory of the far right. So it's getting...
Now, that stuff was happening all through Trump's presidency. I do note that it was not until the actual seats of power got threatened that we saw action. That's not something we act on now. That's something to remember. Be a cold mother. Hold on to it. And remember that for later. Later we will use it. Later, we will bring this up when we're talking about why we are enacting radical political change. It's going to happen. I think decent people are just about fed up. However, we're not there yet. We're here now. So let's deal with the here and now. Trump is doing his best to kick off violence. That means we're going to have to be on guard. In fact, let's talk about this on the other side. We're going to have to be on guard. And it really is as simple as the slogans the FBI have provided. If you see something, say something. We have heard about a couple of the terrorist attacks that were thwarted because somebody did just that. We don't hear about them very often because there's not a lot of information to go over generally. And after the thing has happened, it leaves the news cycle. As well it should, because it's not news anymore. And in fact, you're in the individual case making it harder for healing to happen. I don't mean healing as in forgetting about, ignoring. I mean the human being who got arrested needs mental help. Probably because they were a Trump supporter, but also because they were about to do something evil and violent. So it's good that it leaves the news, but the downside is that in the long term, we don't pay very much attention to how important that is. I realize we're concerned about living in a surveillance state. Let's be clear, though. We're also living in a state that is heavily favored for stomping on lefties and lifting up right-wingers who want nothing more than to piss down. So we need to do the work. Just make it easy. Make it easy for the FBI to intervene. If you see something in your area, if somebody's posting threats, if they say I'm going to X or Y this person or that person involved with the case, there's a link in the description to the FBI electronic submission form for just such a scenario. Use it. That simple. Well, let me put it like this. Save it. It's that simple. And if you come across such a threat, use it. We're going to have, until we reach the time that Trump is genuinely treated, like anybody else would be in this situation, which is to say, he's thrown in a jail cell and his phone is taken away by the warden, who says, of course you can't have it, you're a prisoner. And of course you're a prisoner. You all but dared us to throw you in here. Until that happens, it's going to be real dangerous. And Trump has a terrible case. He knows it. The facts simply don't line up with what he says happened. He did not obey the law. He broke the law, or so it would appear. So, he's going to be relying on out-of-courtroom tactics. In other words, illegal tactics. So if you see somebody making threats against the judge, if you see somebody doxing anyone involved with this case, including, oh, hey, by the way, jurors, which has been or threatened to happen recently, report them to the FBI. And hopefully, if they get a flood of reports and they find that they are busy constantly, hopefully they will make a request of the judge or whatever powers at B are in charge of it will make a request to the judge to say, this is too much work for us to be doing all day, every day. Basically, our jobs are now just constantly dealing with the terrorists this guy stirs up. Put him in jail. Letterhack, good to see ya. Mars Falcon, pigs need zero reason to stop a poor on the streets. No reason at all. They do it thousands of times a day. Yes, I would agree with that. Radical centrist. I agree that January 6th brought a lot of the worst out of the woodwork, but I also think there is plenty more lunatics where they came from. I agree. I do think those folks that were at January 6th represented the peak of Trump's militant power. But I mean, you're not wrong. There's lots of folks out there. There's folks who were in jail on January 6th who would have been there otherwise. There's all kinds of kooks. And we got to just be ready for them. It sounds lame, but the reality is the most effective thing you can do is call the cops. I mean, give a heads up to the FBI if these people are running their mouths about X or Y. And deep down, by the way, deep down, I think that's a call for help. Not you literally calling the FBI for help, because we're not a vigilantism supporting country, nor should we be. But I think that's them calling for help. I think when they're saying, we should do blank, or here's my gun, I'm thinking about it, I think that's them in their own non-therapy attending way telling their community, hey, somebody stop me before I make a mistake that I'm going to have to serve real time for. So oblige them. Ooh, Scott Ward. Uh-oh, that's what I got out of what Jake said. Look, I do have a tendency, and I'm seeing it now rearing its ugly head. I do have a tendency to say things that sound like double entendres, and to with people. Sometimes I intentionally say double entendres. But if it's very, very clever, I didn't mean it. If it's particularly clever, it probably wasn't intended. So whatever I said, I do apologize. Oh, God, yeah. I had never, Scott Ward, I had never thought of trickle-down economics as a golden shower by the rich upon us. All right, that I did mean to say. Mars Falcon, it's not illegal to give out addresses. I get what you were feeling, Jake, but it's not sufficient reason to put him in jail. I get why lefties are saying these things, but it is authoritarian tinged. Now, that's a good point. That is a good point. I'm willing to eat my words on the giving out of addresses. Let me back that up. Don't contact the FBI over the giving out of addresses. Do, however, given the context, do report the post. Not to the feds, and I apologize. You're right. That's too much. And in fact, that would weigh things down. If you see somebody threatening an actual piece of violence, if they're showing, for example, a picture of a rifle with a scope on it, and saying like, "Ooh, I can't wait for Chutkin to come to church today," yeah, report that person to the FBI. Let me do the other thing though. If you see somebody doxing these folks, report it on the social media platform. Definitely don't allow that post to just stay up there. Number one, because doxing in any context it's just not cool. It's a violation of the rules we're all agreeing to play by when we're on social media. But also, it's dangerous. Like, we know what is being said about these folks, and we know there's a huge group of unstable people that are going to try to do them harm if they can. So I will correct that to do report it to, if it's doxing, report it to the social media service. But you're right, it's authoritarian to go too far. Oh no, Anti-Corporatus is on the phone again. Oh, I hope the missus is all right. Mars Falcon, careful please. No, you're quite correct. Wicked Foxy Dragon, I think it depends. I doubt these people are just posting a name and addresses. There is probably a message with it as well. Yeah. What I was referring to was a specific example, but I didn't say the specific example. I said generally, or I ended up saying generally, and that was wrong. The specific example, yes, that should have gone to the FBI. It was a post where somebody was saying, like, we have to go to their houses and deal with this. Wink. That should have. But you're right. It was awkwardly put, and I'm glad you corrected me in real time so I could address it now instead of doing a big thing about it tomorrow. We do have some of the stuff that is a little bit more what I wanted to deal with when I imagined what this show could be. I'm delighted to get there. I think through the work you guys have put in, we can maybe not relax completely on the Trump stuff, but it's in the courts now. We did the hard part. Cool. So let's go fix some other things. talk about working conditions in the US of A. I don't know about you, but I have had an unpleasant time being an employee in America. I found that for 30 years, I was generally asked to do increasingly more distressing things for terrible pay. And it is now at the point where once relatively respected places are now putting their workers through conditions that, to me, feel more like the 1800s. You know, when somebody's pawpaw was died in the mill, you know, things like that. Unnecessarily brutal conditions. Let's have a look at CNN, of all places, discussing this.
That particular day I would never forget. I just assumed that he just passed out. The heat index was like 119. I received a call from the Presbyterian Hospital, from the chaplain, and I knew.
He was in the emergency room. The doctors met with us there. He basically told me that my son would be in a vegetative state for the rest of his life. His organs were fried. He had a core body temperature of 110, and they were trying to lower his body temperature, but when he died, it was still extremely high. My son, his name was Gabriel Christopher Infante. He was 24 years old when he passed. He was a great son, a great brother.
My husband's name was Eugene Talbot Gates Jr. He was of little words. He had a beautiful smile, but once you got to know him, he would talk to you. He would talk your ear off like you've known him for years. He was a letter carrier for the U.S. Postal Service, and he was on the job for 36 years.
From 2011 to 2021, there have been more than 400 to get worse.
But for me, as an American, there is something particularly galling about hearing that employees of the United States Postal Service died because of the working conditions they were asked to endure. And they died of something which the U.S. is partially responsible for, the extraordinary heat that we're enduring, and because they couldn't cool off. What an unnecessary thing. What's the point of all these goddamn cars? With all this air conditioning, there's a hell of a lot of Freon bouncing around our highways. How come, as a society, we're doing all of this, but our frickin' mailmen are dropping? Where are our priorities? I think as a people, they're pretty good. I think if I asked any of you, I think, frankly, even if I asked a Republican, should it be dangerous for your life? Should it be dangerous to be a mailman? No, of course, no. What's a great sign of civilization? Well, you can carry the mail without ducking. It's galling to me that it feels like we're regressing, and we're dealing with problems we don't have to. The problem is, I think, that we have not had the structure in place for actually getting done what we want to do. We're going to get back to that in a second. Let's hear this out.
Carla Gates and Velma Infante both lost loved ones who died working outside in the extreme heat in Texas. In both instances, the heat index was in triple digits. In Eugene's case, It felt like 119 degrees the day he was delivering mail.
He fell out in a neighbor's yard, and when she did CPR, and I just dropped the phone, and I told my sister, he's gone. I knew. The last time I saw my husband, he had a tube down his throat. That was the last time I saw him.
In a photo taken by a delivery driver near Dallas 2 days before Eugene's death, the temperature in a U.S. postal truck, like the one he was said to be driving, reached nearly 140 degrees. Eugene's cause of death is still awaiting confirmation. The Dallas Medical Examiner's Office told CNN that the autopsy could take up to 90 days to complete. In an email to CNN, the Postal Service said it was deeply saddened by Eugene's death and that it implements mandatory heat-related safety training and instructions for its drivers.
You know, I don't need any training to turn on the air conditioning. It's possible that I'm just like a wunderkind, you know? I'm that talented. Figured it out all on my own. I did. Pressed the button and everything. Crazy idea. Let's just cut him a check for a couple of $1 billion because it's the United States Postal Service and put air conditioning in all their vehicles. That seems like a pretty simple solution. See, you guys are mentioning Louis DeJoy. I understand that Biden can't personally fire him. But it's not as though this guy can't be fired. There is a board that can do it, and I'd like them to fire him. But that is not what you can do about this. We're going to get to that very shortly. Let's. This is a short clip. I'll quit talking over it.
It's always hot. It was hot last year. It's hot this year. And the other day I panicked at the store when I got off because it was just so hot, and I stopped traffic thinking like I can barely withstand 103-degree weather. My son's body temperature was 110. What was going through his mind when he was going through this?
I can answer that, actually. Or at least I can take a pretty darn good whack at answering it, and I really will stop interrupting after this. What was going through his mind? I got bills to pay. I live in a country where if I don't have enough money, I will one bad diagnosis is it for me. I live in a country where I could be homeless next month if I make the wrong decisions. I live in a country where neither myself nor anybody else who does the job that I do, which is the job of carrying letters, can afford to buy a new home or fix up their car because we're living paycheck to paycheck. That's what he was thinking, if I had to guess. And he was thinking, if I go home today, because it is too hot, I'll get fired and my life will be over. And so he stayed. Life is now over.
You know, kind of hallucinating, and he was real red, and the foreman said I had to call the police because he was aggressive with my coworker, with the worker, and I said, but that's not my son. My son is not like that. He thought my son was on drugs because of the delirium and the hallucinations and things like that.
Velma is now suing Gabriel's former employer, B-Com Constructors, alleging negligence for the death of her son. The company did not respond to CNN's questions about the ongoing lawsuit. Gabriel had been on the job installing fiber optic cables in the San Antonio area for just 5 days before he passed.
Well, I take it back. That guy wasn't a UPS driver. That guy installed fiber optic cables. Exact same set of circumstances, but for an entirely different industry, for what he was thinking. That is somehow, to me, even sadder.
Any worker in any type of job that you do should be able to come home in the evening to their families.
Currently, there are few federal protections in place for workers facing extreme heat. Cities like Dallas and Austin have some laws that mandate things like water breaks for workers, but Republican Governor Greg Abbott is currently in the process of rolling back local authorities' powers to protect workers.
What I'm thinking is, are other states going to try to pull something like our governor did with this law? The governor should come out one day and be out here in the heat just with all these workers to see what he feels.
Governor Abbott's office told CNN that nothing in Texas or federal law prohibits employers
Hold on. Now, let's just let it finish.
from allowing workers to take water breaks in hot weather, and that the new state law still maintains the federal standards for worker safety. However, there are virtually no federal standards in place when it comes to extreme heat specifically.
People want to hear, people need to know that it's real. The heat can cause death. This heat is not the same as it was 20 years ago.
Even though I try to be strong during the day, at night when I get home from whatever it is I'm doing, it consumes me, and I don't wish that on any mother or any parent.
It's unbearable, and we got to do better. We have to save these workers' lives.
He's missed every day, extremely missed every day.
Just want to talk about that Greg Abbott quote for a second. Good Lord. First of all, he said there's nothing preventing employers from let me look at that. Nothing preventing employers from implementing safety standards. Every loss of life is a tragedy, and our hearts go out to those who have lost a loved one, which is worth exactly nothing. Oh, I take it back. Of course, their hearts went out to them. That'll bring them back. Nothing in Texas or federal law prohibits employers from allowing workers to take water breaks in hot weather. Yeah, nothing prevents them. That really wasn't the issue, though, Greg Abbott. The issue was that nothing requires them to allow this. Nothing requires them. That, Greg Abbott, is the job of the government. To look out for the people. To be their voice when it comes to making the rules. Greg Abbott. Obviously, what you can do in the long term, for God's sake, get rid of Republicans. We don't need them. There is not a Republican I can think of in this particular moment, and I am racking my brain, that is good. That is looking out for the people. At a minimum, I would hope we have Democrats just sweep in 2024. But specifically, progressives would be best. We need actual protections for workers. We need actual federal regulations. However, for too long we have relied solely on our politicians. And this generation of workers, I think, has it right. They're forcing employers to behave decently. They're simply giving employers no choice. What can you do about this? People literally dying in the heat. You can start a union in your workplace if you don't have one. Or if someone tells you their workplace is awful, you can actually have something useful that they can do. I mean, yeah, you can just be a shoulder to cry on, but you can actually change their workplace. You can change their lives and make them better by showing them how they can start a union. There's a link to my favorite article on this from the UFCW. That's the United Food and something whatever workers. But they talk about how to start a union in 7 steps. And it's pretty straightforward. Within the article, there's further links to the places you need to go. But at the end of the day, it's really as simple as following the 7 steps. You talk to your worker, take a vote. You get enough of your workers to sign up on a sheet, literally just sign their names on a sheet. You send that to a place. It's a government agency that approves unions. You get your approval, you take a vote in the workplace, and if you pass the vote, that is that. You have a union. And unions stop things like this from happening. They stop workers from boiling on the job. We're going to need them more and more as the rest of our failures catch up with us one by one. Next up, global warming. We're going to need workers having the ability to insist that they be treated decently. Start a union in your job if it doesn't have one already. And if you have somebody complaining about awful working conditions, I would highly recommend you show them yourself how to start a union. Links in the description. Dawned on me. Get adjusted to the authoritarian rule like Abbott and many red states' governor, because it's setting the stage to get residents to accept government isn't to represent society. Yeah. I think that's probably pretty accurate. Buffering problems. Uh-oh. Okay. Well, I will hope for the best. Hopefully it catches up. Mars Falcon says, "Oh yeah, to Mike. So many the Mike's Dead show. So many atrocities perpetrated by so many hacks over the last half decade. I get mixed up sometimes with who did what grotesque thing when. That's brutal and true." Aunt Button, another increasing danger workers face is being on a timer for every individual task. In order to meet the time standard, you have to cut safety corners. It's true. It's true. Pinkerbell, he, referring to Greg Abbott, is outlawing water breaks. Like right now. God damn it. Of course he is. I'm recalling that now. I've said this earlier. We're a long time, politically speaking, from what I'm about to say. But I want to brag about it. If I wind up being right. I think that within our lifetimes, a lot of the folks who are acting like a bunch of goddamn savages right now, chief among them being Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis, I think they're going to be in prison for their behavior. I have been a bystander to the legal profession for a long time, which means I have the benefit of a bystander's perspective. I ain't no Michael Popak. But as a bystander, I've been able to see the broad strokes. And broadly speaking, what I see is that prosecutors basically have... no. There's usually a law that exists already to express formally the kinds of things that you and I would express in an informal conversation. And we'll find that it has a Latin name or some whatever the hell. But there's usually a way to express thoughts, feelings, arguments through existing laws. And I think we're a couple of years shy of prosecutors formally putting into words in the form of an indictment the ways in which the cruelty of people like Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis are illegal. How they have broken the law. They're going to say it was either what's an example of the kind of thing I'm thinking of, like malpractice or dereliction of duty or something along those lines. But again, I mean, this isn't my crystal ball is just my backyard, which we'll talk about more in a moment. But in Flint, Michigan, Governor Snyder, when go back in time slightly, when the Flint water crisis happened, which is still not, by the by, fully resolved. When that happened, Governor Rick Snyder was in charge in Michigan. In 2020, I think, he was charged for it, and he beat the charges. Not a happy story. He walked. But the mood of the country is changing, and we're getting sick of this nonsense. And we're getting sick of getting gaslit. And I fully expect, if you're looking for signs of hope, if I can share with you what I genuinely feel, and I very much suspect that we're going to have a Governor Snyder situation occurring again and again throughout the country as people demand that their leaders be held to account and put in prosecutors in their local offices that will pursue such cases. That's my suspicion, and I reserve the right to brag about it if it's correct. Just to be absolutely insufferable. Obsessive Audio. Hey, y'all, late to the party? Well, good to see ya. Tamara Chance. Abbott doesn't give H2O breaks, but breaking wind is okay. Well, I glass houses there for your old pal Jake. I couldn't criticize him for that, but certainly, certainly he's the devil for his H2O break. Whatchamacallit, policy. Amanda Patton, hey, good to see you. Yeah, if you're still having a Tuesday, I hope it's a really good Tuesday. I'm a fan of that gal, y'all. And that was in response to her saying, hi, y'all, happy Tuesday. Indeed, happy Tuesday to you, too, whenever it rolls around, and Thursday, too. My God. Oh, speaking of random, this for if anybody in the audience is interested. I'm presently being visited by a nephew named Charlie, and he's very sweet and doing very, very well. Here's a fun fact about he's young enough that I'm not doxing him. Oh, but I don't know that's true. Anyway, I'm charmed by him. That's all. I guess that's all I can say without feeling bad. Ooh, yes, the Attorney General of hey, Obsessive Audio, good to see you. The Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, is indeed up for impeachment. Who said that? Mike's Dead Show. Yes, indeed. Good. And by the way, when Paxton goes down, when they have his trial, you can bet he's taking a bunch of people with him. I don't have a beat to follow there, but he's definitely taking a bunch of people with him. It's going to be a blast and a half. Also, sorry. Also, if you note that I'm turned slightly oddly today, I was moving my computer around recently, and I'm noticing I didn't set it up correctly. It's just going to be awkward, but we have another segment that is significantly less sad that I would like to show you. And talk about what you can do about it. Boy, my least favorite political person to talk to deal with these days are the NIMBY people, the not in my backyard folks. Maybe it's because they're like, what they do is so in the gray area. It's like it's one of those things where I understand how you get there. I do. And as a result, like I can't be as freely angry at them as I can be with like the fascists. Like we can just agree. I could just agree with a fascist at least on one thing, which is that we hate each other. And there's something freeing in that. But the NIMBY folks, boy, it's always a slog. Well, here's a little bit about how we can deal with that. Let's talk about getting affordable housing for everybody. And once again, I got to thank our friends in Canada for bringing us these hot facts. Facts. I'm going to stick with facts. Nope. That's CNN still. Well, it's going to be an awkward recording, y'all. But that's okay. Hey, you know what? If you keep your head up, sometimes you get a miracle. All right, here we go.
If there's anything we find encouraging about the future of housing affordability, it's that the Yes in My Backyard pro-housing movement crosses political and ideological lines.
Boom.
This week, 3 bills making big changes in how Montana cities handle zoning passed through the House with broad margins and bipartisan support.
Unfortunately, the Not in My Backyard activists who oppose housing and neighborhood change are also pretty diverse politically.
I have seen a city of renters, and it's terrible.
My constituents did not elect me to line the pockets of developers, to gut zoning regulations, and ignore the wishes of our cities and towns.
In this video, we're going to cover pro-housing and anti-housing positions from 4 different political perspectives.
The environmentalist case for YIMBYism is that denser development is just better for the environment. It sounds counterintuitive given the trope of cities as concrete jungles, but building more compactly and building up are very effective strategies for paving over less forests, farmland, and otherwise ecologically valuable land. If Brooklyn had the density of Staten Island, it would take up.
I threw myself there a little bit by not having this loaded up. My bad. First of all, that was Juan Mendez. He's a Democrat. That is the point they were making, is that the NIMBYism, it reaches across political aisles, the aisle, whatever. What I wanted to say to y'all going into this, which I will now say, is that imagine for a moment you're running for city council. Or imagine for a moment you're pitching affordable housing to your city council. Take a look at your community. Decide generally what they are. Are they leaning more towards one style or the other? Are they Austin or are they Houston? There's a difference. Understand your crowd and play to them. Don't lie to them. Even if they don't know how you're lying, they can smell a lie. Just assume that it is so. Don't lie to them. But be a salesperson about it, you know? Tell whatever is true of these things, of this presentation you're about to hear on how to pitch affordable housing to different folks. How to get rid of NIMBYism. And pitch it that way. So I ask you only to listen to this while at the same time imagining that you personally are going to do this at a city council meeting, say.
Up almost 5 times more land than it currently does. Letting people live closer to things makes walking, cycling, and transit more practical, allowing them to leave cars for trips where they're really needed. Motor vehicles spew all sorts of things into the air that give people cancer, respiratory diseases, and other health problems, on top of contributing to climate change. One study from California found that urban infill development, allowing more homes where people already live, is one of the best strategies to decrease greenhouse gas emissions.
Just a heads up, obviously this is the pitch to progressives, the kind of thing you would do. Okay.
Environmentalism gets housing wrong when it takes an extremely local perspective and ignores the bigger picture. Ann Arbor, Michigan recently rezoned a commercial corridor notable for its oceanic parking lots to allow high-density housing with the goal of creating a more downtown-style environment that's more pedestrian-friendly and less car-centric. One councilor opposed the changes. The craze to fill our city with new residents overlooks the fact that every person we bring here brings their carbon footprint. This makes no sense. Carbon doesn't get counted according to city boundaries, and people moving to a higher density, less car-centric neighborhood are going to have a lower carbon lifestyle on average. Another environmentalism hazard is focusing too much on aesthetics and seeing green things, which can lead someone to think that the monoculture, manicured lawns of suburbia are the pinnacle of environmentalism. Even more urban environmentalists are not immune to prioritizing aesthetics over function. A former city councilor in Ottawa recently declared that no building should be higher than the highest tree, which he declared to be 6 stories.
The conservative case for YIMBYism is that dense, mixed-use neighborhoods are just the traditional way that cities and towns were built, for as long as humans...
Now, just a minute here. You might be thinking, wait a minute. They're trying to appeal to conservative populism while pitching affordable housing? Yes. It can be done. Remember, I'm encouraging y'all to run, even if you're in a bright red district. Even if your town is bright red, run. Run for office. Or at least try to convince your city council to do something you would like. You can still pitch to these folks. You can even pitch to populists amongst these folks. Here is how. I won't waste your time rephrasing something I thought they phrased great the first time. But understand that all the ugly stuff we've been seeing of late, number one, doesn't need to does not represent the entirety of, let's say, I hesitate to say conservative because Republicans are hardly conservative anymore, but that conservative populism. And number two, if we don't acknowledge other elements of the things these people like, then that will be all they are. Because that'll be they will be getting advertisement for their worst ideas from us if all we ever try to appeal to is either the people that hate their worst ideas, or we just pretend like they have no populism. In which case, then we're just Democrats running in the center by agreeing to give giant breaks to gianter businesses. So yes, let's look at the populist conservative pitch for denser housing.
Settlements existed until the radical suburban experiment of top-down planning and one-size-fits-all approaches to housing. Neighborhoods built before modern zoning were based on organic growth according to the needs of individuals and households. So, for example, if your retired parents are getting older, you can build a secondary suite in your backyard for them. This is not legal on most land in most cities under modern zoning. Taller apartment buildings might or might not be for you, but they're only financially viable in a city where there's demand and need for them. Traditional mixed-use main streets are more conducive to smaller and more local businesses, and more traditional compact urban forms allow children more independence and physical activity without needing to be driven everywhere.
Conservatism gets housing and density wrong when it turns exclusionary. Modern housing regulations almost always prioritize larger homes that take more land and cost more money. And that's appealing to a lot of people as a method of government-enforced economic segregation. Why do we want a bunch of poor people in Alexandria anyway? No one does except city council, so they can tax the property and live their progressive dream of turning us into a mini San Francisco. This exclusionary instinct often targets renters.
And I've seen cities of renters, and it's ugly. It's unkept. It's noisy. Strangers, schools, issues. The whole thing sounds to me as if it is absurd. It sounds like a a socialist kind of idea, and I'm not a name caller. If I sound like a NIMBY, too bad, because I care about me, my neighbors, my friends, and my cities. Single-family homes are going to be doomed. And when that happens, part of the spine of a city becomes doomed.
The progressive case for YIMBYism is that rules about what kind of housing is allowed and where fundamentally reinforce economic inequality. Through zoning.
Okay. Just want to touch on that the last segment for a second. Mars Falcon, conservatism consists of exactly one proposition, to wit, there must be in-groups from who the law protects but does not bind, alongside out-groups from who the law binds but does not protect. Quoting Frank Wilhoit. I hope I said that correctly. First of all, wow, good poll. Second, I'm going to steal it. Thank you. Second of all, I think whatever conservatism is in reality, what it is in theory, is a resistance to change. So if you want to appeal to that mentality, you just approach it, and again, do so honestly, but approach it from the aesthetics of it. Like, do you really want these cookie-cutter neighborhoods? Do you really want these economically inefficient cities? Do you really want the government telling, if you're appealing to small government types, do you really want the government restricting what you can do with a piece of property that you bought with legal tender? These are things you can say that they are absolutely in line with having more affordable housing available. There's also a huge difference between the conservative voter and the conservative politician. That Frank Wilhoit quote, I would pin largely on the politician and say that the voter is just the person who is, they're giving their pitch to. That's really all politicians are doing. They're giving their best pitch for the things they think ought to be done. And in the case of the modern conservative politician, particularly in the United States, and I'm so sorry to say it, Canada as well, they're really good at doing pitches, but unfortunately they have no interest whatsoever in helping anybody else other than themselves.
You are effectively banned from building anything other than a mansion in Toronto's Bridle Path neighborhood. Some recent citywide reforms make it a little better, but you still can't build apartments. Rich people literally use the power of the government to ban anyone else from living in their neighborhoods. Mansion zoning is the most egregious case, but most cities reserve most land for only single-family detached homes, the most expensive type of housing, limiting apartment buildings, both tall and short, to small sections of the city, often near highways or arterial roads. Treating denser housing as a nuisance that has to be carefully managed leads to housing scarcity, raising prices and putting power in the hands of landlords and home sellers. Additionally, our broken housing system doesn't just hinder private development. Talk to anyone who builds nonprofit or affordable housing, and they'll tell you that low-density zoning, parking requirements, and community opposition are major barriers in their housing work.
A new development in Orleans that includes affordable housing units will be delayed because of a parking issue.
Some suggesting, though, it's not really about parking, it's about keeping affordable housing out of the neighborhood.
Oh, no, I'm not against affordable housing at all. It's just, I think there's other places that would probably be a little bit better.
Progressivism gets housing wrong when it rejects incremental progress, in favor of idealism that perpetuates the status quo. The Arizona Senate Democrats spoke out against state-level housing reforms by saying,
Can you guess? Can you guess which Arizona Senate Democrat that was?
that
Housing
He's back.
plans that upend our cities and towns' local control is a non-starter. Our motto cannot be that a $300,000 house is cheaper than a $500,000 house.
But that's a really big improvement that would make stable housing accessible for hundreds of thousands more families in Arizona. Perversely, this way of thinking gets even more appealing the more expensive your city is. Who wants to argue that an 8-plex with units starting at $900,000 is the solution to housing affordability? Well, that actually would have been a step in the right direction in West Vancouver. Average home price $3 million, where that project was rejected, with one councillor complaining that the starting price is still out of reach for many. Another progressive mistake is thinking that supporting nonprofit housing development should be paired with obstructing for-profit housing construction. There's a pervasive idea that we can just reject market-rate housing because the private market is fundamentally incapable of serving regular people, but that's plainly not true. A townhouse in Edmonton, a fast-growing city with high incomes, averages $260,000, with condos averaging $195,000. To be clear, this does not solve every housing problem or eliminate homelessness.
I do want to say, obviously, if you want to know obviously the one I'm going to object to most is the one that gives the pitch and the criticism to the progressive side. You know, a $500,000 house and $1 million house are absolutely no different to me whatsoever. I have the same ability to purchase either, and so does everybody else I have ever worked alongside. However, you know, they're not wrong. You get houses in an area to be made a little more practically, a little more humble, and you get 2 houses out of a chunk of land instead of 1, and suddenly they're being sold for $500 when they were selling for $1 million. That makes it easier for the next step, where there's houses built somewhere near there that go for $300, and the next step where so on and so on. And a couple miles away, your old pal Jake can afford a nice, humble shack. But still, they're not wrong, is all I want to say. They're just, you gotta appreciate that they are talking about an extraordinarily long-term plan for affordable housing. But again, they're not wrong. We being progressives here, as a voting bloc and as a bunch of candidates, do tend to reject the less bad in pursuit of the great. And I don't think that's always the wrong instinct, but I do think we should be more open to taking steps in the right direction, so long as that we ensure that isn't the end of the story or the fight.
But it's fundamentally more functional for middle and even lower income households, compared to high-cost cities where housing has gone completely off the rails.
The libertarian case for YIMBYism is that zoning and land use regulations are some of the most blatant infringements on freedom and property rights in North America. Why does your city government get to dictate how big your lawn is, or prevent you from redeveloping your property into a multiplex or apartment building? What's worse, the economic research is clear that these burdensome land use regulations hinder economic growth by making jobs.
Side note, by God, this is a good channel. This is useful as strategy, I think.
Job markets less efficient.
We do become more productive when we are surrounded by a maelstrom of economic activity. People for us to work with, to learn from, to sell to buy from.
Despite their inclusive rhetoric, high-opportunity cities like New York and San Francisco effectively exclude large classes of people from living there through their dysfunctional housing markets. Liberalizing land use regulations might be one of the best policies out there to promote economic mobility.
I know of no pathway out of poverty into prosperity that does not run through city streets.
Allowing more compact development patterns is also good for city finances. Forcibly spreading people out inflates cities' infrastructure liabilities.
Libertarianism or free market conservatism gets housing wrong when it prioritizes local control rather than freedom. Colorado House Republicans oppose state-level housing reforms to legalize more housing across Colorado, saying that the attack on local control goes against the principles of small government libertarianism, even though the local governments are the ones enacting onerous regulations, and the state government was trying to legalize more housing.
A newly rolled out affordable housing legislation would allow denser development throughout Colorado's biggest cities. Opponents of the legislation, including the Colorado Municipal League, say it steamrolls local control and home rule.
The Republican acting mayor of Greenwood Village, Colorado, dismissed these state-level reforms as a mandate denying people the right to have a say over who their neighbors are. A scholar from a free enterprise think tank characterized California's state-level efforts to override local control and legalize more housing construction as Soviet-era central planning.
Okay. Damn it. Libertarians, man, they're a hoot. I just want to say you can really see a lot about how politicians function with those arguments. Like, if you stop and think about what a libertarian is supposed to be, or even what conservative small government types are supposed to be, look at how that one fellow was twisting those words. He was saying it's denying people the right to have a say in who their neighbors are. The whole idea is it's, according to what I was told conservatives gave a damn about. It's supposed to be that nobody has a say in what you do. Or at least libertarians, that's supposed to be their belief. Nobody gets to bother you. You get to go do your own thing. That's the way they work. So your neighbors, for example, don't have a say in what property you can buy and what you can do with it. That's the libertarian way. It's supposed to be. Anyway. But no. This guy doesn't want poors in his area. So he says, can't deny people the right to say who their neighbors will be. Jackass.
There's also a sentiment in many libertarian circles associating cars with freedom, leading some otherwise libertarian-minded people to support rules that mandate and micromanage how much parking needs to be included in new buildings, instead of leaving it up to demand and normal market forces to decide. Thanks for watching through to the end of the video. Special thanks to our supporters on Patreon.
Oh, they're funking out there. Yeah. What can you do about it? Pretty straightforward. Go to your, if you want to talk specific, go to your city council. Go to their public sessions. You can thank Obama for this. They're required to have public sessions and propose affordable housing initiatives. I know I bust Obama's chops all the time. I give him one. Consider running for a seat on your city council. You want to have the ability to have at least one person on your city council who always votes the way you think they ought to vote? That can be you. It's that simple. Get all your friends to run as well. Y'all can literally run that city. It's not terribly difficult. In fact, you and all your if you're in a small enough town and you and all your friends decide to run, just take over your city council. You can vote for multiple people on the city council. So you convince somebody to vote for you. You're also probably convincing them to vote for your pal. These are elections which are generally won by a couple of hundred votes. If you're talking like town council, that sort of thing. That's what we're talking about. You could literally take over your town and run it however you feel is best. But that's a lot of work. And I don't want to only pitch you things that are going to be freaking exhausting. You can also just go to your city council's public sessions and propose affordable housing initiatives. But broadly, for this, you can do this, and for all arguments, understand how to pitch these things to the crowd you're talking to. Do not lie. Don't lie about what it is, but do sell. Focus on the true arguments that will sway your crowd, your target audience. There's a reason I tend to select the clips that I do. It's because your old pal Jake is convinced he's got straight fire suggestions. And I'm not interested in telling people who aren't terribly fond of the Jews how to get things done. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't have the ability to talk to people outside of our preferred political sphere. And if what we are doing is right and correct and true as we say it is, then it really should be good for everybody. And you really should be able to make a case to most folks for why it's good for them. So, know your audience, pitch to them correctly, and strongly consider running for city council. As always, links are in the description, but in this one, it's just your home city council. Take it over. Or pitch to them. Let's see what y'all have to say. Ooh, Aunt Button, the power to pick and choose who can live next door to you is antithetical to that all men are created equal thing. Yes. Yes, it is. Anti-corporatist. Man, when is Pac-Man back from vacation? I hope that troth essential didn't get him. The globalists. Yes, indeed. Pinkerbell, NIMBYism is class war. Yes, it is. Amanda Patton, it seems to me like another big factor regarding which groups will support adding new affordable housing is what is being replaced. That is a great point. Yeah, I think so. And I also think when it comes to pitching things to your city council, you can use that fact to your advantage. If, for example, there is a famous eyesore in town, you might be able to get more people behind the idea of putting in inexpensive apartments there, if doing so is going to get rid of something that nobody likes anyway. I think that's an excellent point. Amanda Patton, in other words, environments might oppose building new apartments in a marsh area or something, or the environmentalists, I see, in a marsh area or something, or the historical folks might oppose tearing down an old building. Yeah, true. And you can use it the other way. Like you can approach that from where is, like, for example, in Grand Haven, Michigan, where I was posted up not too long ago. There was this coal factory, like a power factory that ran on coal, and it shut down because it was to the point where the renovations needed to keep it going were insanely expensive. It would have been cheaper to build an entire new factory, but it was even cheaper than that to buy their energy from elsewhere, and that's what the city started to do. So the old factory was just there, and it was ugly as hell, and if it wasn't doing anything, people wanted it gone. Right then, if I had been a little more savvy at the time, that's when it would have been a great time for your old pal Jake to pitch turning it into affordable housing. So I think Amanda Patton saying tear down the Walmarts. Yes. But the point being, I think you can use that to your advantage as well. You can use use your knowledge of the local environment to pick and choose. Anti-corporatist, my not too with it conservative homie didn't even get that globalist was slang for Jew. Yeah, it's really maddening. And I would take the opportunity to twist the knife with your conservative pal. Like, once you show them that it is in fact slang for Jew, ask them why the need to hide what they meant to say, you know? Obsessive audio. Cars are like this financial pit and constant elevated danger. Yeah, it's cool to be able to drive places, but I never equated cars with freedom. I used to, and I feel foolish for having done so. You're right. They are a financial drain, and if you don't live a lifestyle where one is recorded. It is actually quite freeing to stop driving it all the damn time. It's like like an animal that always has expensive vet bills. Like, god damn, I appreciate what you do, but ooh, hurting the wallet. Wireless mic, charter housing for more choice. Fair enough. Fair enough. Let's go back up a little bit. Mars, in quotes, making redlining commonplace again so I can choose my neighbors and keep those people out of my eyesight. Exactly. Yes. Oh, man, oh, man. Ooh. Well, here was my plan. My plan was to do a second stream that is all call-in. All call-in. But once again, we're having internet connectivity issues. How about this? Tomorrow is Friday Peace Talks. What do you say we do? Whoa! What do you say we do a call-in show? Y'all have been saying for a while we should. I think you're right. I think the technology is ready to go. But it could be a disaster. If it is, it'll be a fun disaster. Let me know what you think. Drop it in the comments. Certainly, I have the comments set so that I can review. But I'll do that during the closing tunes as well. Let me know what you think. If you want to do the all call-in show. Oh, wait a minute. I can just do a poll. Phone-in Fridays. Damn it. With the alliteration. All right. We're doing a poll. Taking advantage of this. All in. Damn it. Show. Friday. Asking. All right. Putting the poll up. I'm going to play it. It's flying. When we get to 10 votes, the first 10. Wait a minute. Yeah, when we get to the quick draw. Oh, dang. Well, I'll tell you, we're blowing past that goal. Son of a gun. That's pretty cool. Wasn't ready for that quick of a reaction. Rad. Well, looks like we're doing an all call-in show, folks. As I said, it'll either be exactly as I'm imagining, and Sam Cedar and Alurinati and what have you will be watching with stars in their eyes, saying, "Man, I wish we were that slick." Or it'll be an absolutely delightful disaster. Either way, I look forward to doing it with y'all. This has been WYCD Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. And my name's Jake.